Good evening and welcome to This Happy Guru. My name's Kirsty Bentley-Taylor. I'm continuing on our series about ancient antidotes tonight. I'm going to be talking about the science of Ayurveda, which kind of seemed a bit of a no-brainer really, given the fact that I'm a yoga teacher and with all the holistic life stuff that I do. I'm dipping into Ayurveda a lot in my career and in my personal life as well. So I thought it would be something that I could discuss with you guys because, again, it's another lifestyle a way of lifestyle, if you like, or a way of life that puts your health, your holistic health, before everything that you do, essentially. It's always trying to keep you in balance. It's always trying to bring you back into balance. But it's based on the principle of having a certain type that you're born into, a certain way of expression that permeates not through just your physical self, but also your emotional self, the type of person that you might be, whether you're quite kind of fiery and angry or whether you're kind of jovial, or, you know, all these sorts of things are taken into consideration with Ayurvedic health. They look at the whole person, and they look at the types of people that you would like perhaps represent or reflect back out there. And they bring those types of people into three categories, and they call these doshas. So at the bottom of the post that's linked into this video today, I've put a couple of PDF files for you guys to work through if you're interested in finding out about your dosha. One of them is all about how you can find out your dosha, and it's a questionnaire. 3 pages. You need to go through all 3 of them, and it's basically a circle or a tick kind of answer sheet. And then underneath that, there's your doshas explained, a PDF that just basically says the general characteristics of each dosha. So perhaps after you've finished listening, you might like to do that for yourselves and really kind of begin to find out a little bit more about the dosha that you might be, and recognize whether or not that actually brings parallels to the kind of person that you really are, that's sort of the characteristics that you would recognize about yourself. I found it fascinating. I had a consultation with an Ayurvedic practitioner while I was in India a few years ago, and it was fascinating. The first time that I'd had any real instruction in this. So I kind of picked up textbooks about it and having a read through. But it started with him taking what I thought was basically my pulse, but he used the first 3 fingers of his left hand to feel, right hand to feel onto the left side on my pulse, on my wrist, and a bit up from where you normally take the pulse. Ordinarily, I think you take the pulse up around here, like on the crux of the wrist, but this was just a little bit up and towards one side. And I kind of just sat there and said, just relax, it's fine. So I was, well, what are you feeling for? And he said, there are 3 little points on your wrist that you can feel. One represents the representation of air, one represents water, and one represents matter, like earth. And they're called Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And each one will pulse more strongly than the other in recognition of what's really coursing through you, the way you're expressing yourself. So basically, all of us have these 3 doshas present in us. All of us are connected to air, fire, and earth within the elements of self, which aligns itself with a lot of other philosophies and a lot of other ways of looking at the holistic self, the human being. But it just interests me that it was kind of like that we've all got these 3 elements within us, and it's what's presenting itself more through the character of who you are, through the structure of your build, through the way you digest things, the way you respond to your environment. All these sorts of things are taken into consideration to determine your dosha. But by taking your doshic pulse, you're able to determine which doshas you're presenting more heavily than others. And some of them are kind of like you normally get 2. You really get a primary and a secondary. Some people quite rare to get all 3 in equal representation, if you like. So basically pulsing all 3 at the same level of strength. Otherwise, you usually get one that comes through and then another one that comes through a little bit more strongly as well, and then a third one which you can feel, but it's quite a low pulse. And the idea is that you bring your doshas into balance. If you're out of balance, then you're going to really feel one very, very strongly, and the other 2 will sort of pale in comparison. If you're coming more into balance, you would be able to feel all 3 kind of, or not into balance, but into full expression of the doshas. You would be able to feel all 3 pulsating quite equally. So as I said, it's quite rare for somebody to be demonstrating all three equally at one stage. And it's also quite rare for somebody to be a real balance of all three doshas mixed up. The majority of us tend to be, like I say, having either a primary and a secondary, or a really strong primary. So this is what I found out in my first Ayurvedic consultation, and I just found that fascinating. What he then went on to say is that the two doshas that were presenting in me most strongly at the time were Kapha and Vata. So Kapha and Vata is air and Kapha is earth. Now, I'm a Virgo, so an earth sign, so that kind of resonated with me. But air was something that hadn't really come into my, idea of the person that I am. But when I began to read through the characteristics of a Vata personality or of a Vata build, all this sort of thing, I could make a lot of alignments. So I thought it'd be great for you guys today at the end of the session, or at the end of the program, to be able to work out your own dosha, or do it as I'm talking if you'd like to. And they're PDF files, so you just need to download them. You can print them off so that you can circle them. You can just go through and make a mental note of what they are, but do each one and basically count up the scores that you get from the most predominant. It's quite self-explanatory on the PDF. And then on the second PDF, you can read all about the characteristics of each dosha and which your primary and your secondary dosha might be. So I thought that would be something quite interesting for you guys to do. And to be able to kind of, bring some of the learning, some of the stuff that I'm going to be sharing with you today into your lives, make it a little bit more personal. So Ayurveda was the sister science that was handed down with yoga around, the dates are always moving, but it feels like about 8,000 years ago, when yoga was passed down. Ayurveda, its sister science, was passed down with it as well. And whereas yoga was the unification, the science behind unifying the mind, the breath, and the body to really become an enlightened and spiritual human being. Ayurveda was also about it's the science of health and longevity. So it's really about keeping the body well in response to all the environmental issues that you go through as a human being in any leg of life. What I really realized through doing my research over this, and I've delved quite deeply into it just before this program, so just the last few days, what's come through to me in all the books that I've read has basically been that the idea 8,000 years ago was that if you kept your body well, then your mind, your emotions, your spirit would all be well. Very much the kind of my body is my temple, and in my body my soul resides idea. In that, if you don't keep the body well, then it will negatively impact all the other parts of you, which I think consciously now we're very aware of. We know that if we have a pain in our leg or in our stomach or something like that, it doesn't just affect our physical self, it will affect our mental self. We would get a little bit obsessed by it. We might become grumpy with the pain, but it's also our emotional selves. We begin to overthink things. We might begin to think, well, how come I'm getting this? What's wrong with me? What have I done? And begin to become anxious, or begin to become worried about something, begin to feel sad that perhaps something specific that you've done has impacted you like this. And so we're really beginning to kind of almost catch up with the ethos that was being shared across the world so long ago. And this is kind of what fascinates me in the cycle of human consciousness and development, is that we seem to go round in these circles, and then something seems to stop, and we seem to almost shift and start another challenge. Everything's cyclical, and we sort of shift and move on to another challenge, almost a bit like a spiral, eventually going up. And that's what I feel is kind of happening with Ayurveda. Feels like when I read back through all these books, these encyclopedias, these manuals on health, even cookbooks, all the philosophy around Ayurveda is about really looking holistically at the body, looking at everything that influences it, not just the food that you put in, although that is a major part of it, but also the environmental influences, whether you're living in a hot country, in a cold country, whether there's a lot of water around you, whether it's damp, all these sorts of things. And because of the way the world was working around 8,000 years ago, there was a lot of sharing of knowledge through mythology, through folklore, through healers coming together and sharing knowledge, sharing things that they'd found out through experience, really coming together from across the planet as well. So when we look back through the history of Ayurveda, it's not just the Indian subcontinent that was affected by Ayurveda. It's also people like the Chinese, the Tibetans, the Persians, the Romans, Egyptians, Afghanis, and the Greeks. And those are the ancient histories that we have some redolence of knowledge about that, where they've actually written stuff that's corresponded with the Vedas and the Ayurvedic text that was given out about about longevity and about keeping yourself well for a long and healthy life. And basically the story of the Indian Silk Road, the silk trade that was going on, and the intertrade of spices and the intertrade of gems and of property and of livestock and all this sort of thing that was traveling around the Silk Road that went through from the Indian subcontinent and dropped down through in most of Asia, in fact. There was a lot of trading of information. There was also a lot of trading of produce, and there was a lot of opportunity for healers and nomads and travelers to get together and share information that they gained, which I love the idea. That to me is super romantic, that people can be traveling for days and days and days to come to almost like a conference in the middle of a desert or something like that and swap and share healing experiences, but also to be able to pass on knowledge and wisdom gained from one country to another. But this is basically how the information and the knowledge and the wisdom of Ayurveda got passed around through and into the Chinese culture, down into the kind of the Roman and the Egyptian culture. There's evidence throughout all these cultures of Ayurvedic methods being used to support health within herbology, all sorts of things, in fact. And so that's fascinating to me as well, that the history of Ayurveda is not only so long, but the fact that it encompasses the whole world. Back in those days, and we're talking around sort of 600, 900 years BC, when a gentleman, when a scribe anyway, called Chavet began to write down some of the Ayurvedic wisdom that was being, until that point, being shared through word of mouth, through guru to seer, through, those old-fashioned methods of being transferred down, like almost shamanic practices being transferred down the line as they are now. As we were talking about ayahuasca a couple of weeks ago, and talking about how it's the shamans that still pick the people that they want to teach based on dreams, based on feeling, based on a more holistic, energetic, spiritual idea of how the world should work, and how people are prepared, whether or not people are prepared enough to be able to share this wisdom out with other people. So this has been fascinating to me, knowing that it's such an ancient text and healing method. So I'm talking about Ayurveda today, and talking about the school of thought around Ayurveda. The history has been fascinating for me to find out about. And some of the physicians of old, how like these days we're so obsessed, it seems, with science proving the traditions of old, science proving herb law, science proving the fact that, flower remedies can help cure certain things and will make, affect you to the point of being able to heal. And it seems like sort of back in 600 to 900 AD, when this scribe Charak was writing down some of the mythology around and the wisdom around Ayurveda, there was the same sort of thing. There was the same idea that stuff needed to be proven. This whole kind of the history of the Vedas in the mythological sense was that it was passed down from God to his angels, and then from angels down to humans. That's the kind of the revere that at that time Ayurvedic practice had, and the Ayurvedic lifestyle was revered in that sense. This was truly a way of being able to live for a long, long time if you kept to the principles of Ayurveda. If you isolated and worked within your doshas, it was more than probable that you were going to live a lovely long life without disease, without upset, without unrest. And interestingly, one of the major things that was isolated around disease at that time was that separation from the divine was the beginning of all unrest, of all disease. And that I found fascinating, because obviously we talk a lot about separation, and also the idea that we've all come from one overriding source, basically, that we're kind of all droplets from the same ocean. And certainly that oneness, I believe, I choose to, live And so for me, as if on a personal level, I kind of like the idea almost in a way that we all have this idea of separateness anyway, because of the fact that we have come from one thing and yet we are independent of that thing. It's almost kind of, I suppose, like a little separation anxiety, if you like, that might kick in once we begin to realize, or once we begin to think that we're separate from the divine. And of course, if you talk about manifestation, and if you talk about really stepping into your divine power, the first thing that you hear people talking about with enlightenment and all that sort of thing is the acceptance that although you are not, although you've been put into this physical body, although you're living in this kind of physical energy world, you're still separate from the original source. And so there's always going to be this kind of separateness. But it's the unification of that idea that brings the oneness back in together. I think it's fascinating. And they isolated this as one of the reasons for disease, sort of, 3,000 years ago. So that was, that's been fascinating to me. And at that time as well, these physicians, the physicians that came together, they had a general school of thought, just reading from my notes, because I wrote all this down. The general school of thought was for them, and this is the people who were studying physiology, anatomy, etiology, pathogenesis, including symptoms and signs of disease, and all of these things. They came to the initial agreement, if you like, that even from a very scientific point of view, this separateness from the divine was the initial cause of all disease. So I started to think on that and started to think, like, that's kind of like separation anxiety. That would be the first thing. And what does anxiety do? What does anxiety kind of bring to us? What's the first thing it does? It brings us down. And we've talked about like vibrations and being energy beings and how vibrations are so important to us. And if you think about being brought down, what does that do? Immediately that lowers your vibe. Anxiety is one of the lowest vibes emotions that humans can feel. It comes along with fear, right? It's, it's hand in hand with fear. And it can produce other low vibration energies that you're going to be expressing, things like anger as well. If you're really, really anxious and somebody kind of sparks or triggers something in you, you can go straight to anger because you're just so uptight, you're so nervous. So perhaps one of the major reasons for this idea that separating from the divine is the first cause of all disease, and that idea that you are separate from them, is because of the level of that anxiety that brings on a soul level. And of course, this is stuff that the Ayurveda is looking at. This is one of the things that Ayurveda is saying you need to be aware of when you're thinking about your holistic health. So when you're looking at the idea that you're anxious and the idea that you are kind of operating in some level, on a soul level, from a low vibration, it's all got to be about building that belief up, that faith up first before you do anything else. And it's interesting because the Yoga Sutras that Patanjali brought down as well, it's a similar sort of thing. It's all about learning about faith and being a good person, so that you can really begin to make wise, divine influence choices. When you look at kind of ahimsa, for example, the idea that it's non-violence towards yourself, non-violence towards other people. Then you've got the yamas and the niyamas, ways of being, ways of behaving, so that you are not triggering upset in other people, but also triggering unrest in yourself. So again, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali seem to be bringing us into alignment with the divine, and Ayurvedic science and the science of longevity and of health that is given to us by Ayurveda is the same principle basically, but through an idea of everything around you nourishing and affecting you. Food, aromas, gems, colors, yoga, of course, but also mantra, lifestyle, surgery, all these things affect you. And that's what Ayurveda was telling us sort of 8,000 plus years ago. And that was what the Ayurvedic practitioners were actually living that long ago as well. So irrespective of whether or not they've got the stresses from computers and gangs and, politics and all that sort of thing that we've got, even back then, they still had the stresses on human life, of course. And so it's interesting to sort of see that the same parallels were drawn and that are still just as relevant today as they were that long ago. So around Ayurveda itself, Ayurveda is the principle of looking at the body in 3 different ways. So we're going to talk about these doshas now. And if you've done the test, you might be aware of which dosha you are already, and you may well have read through the little PDF I've printed off about the doshas. So I'll go through that as well. But so we're all born with 3 doshas that make up our constitution. Most of us have a stronger primary rather than secondary, but the secondary and the primary can be kind of equal, and some people will be able to feel kind of all 3 doshas coming through together. So the doshas affect and reflect, all the elements of air, of fire and earth. And when you think about those elements and how they manifest in our bodies, you might be thinking of air, for example, kind of a floaty sort of person, somebody who's quite creative, who can, bring in dynamic ideas quite quickly. When you're thinking about pitta, you're thinking about fire. Well, fire is a very burning source. It can be, it's hot, it's direct, it's driven. It's again like an encompassing force, if you like. So it will take something and it will use it to bring light, if you like. And kapha is earth. So again, very grounding, but very solid, very heavy. If you think about the matter of earth, it's a very definite presence on this planet. The fact that it's underneath us, everywhere that we go, supporting us, foundational, and grounding, very, very grounding. So like I say, these 3 doshas, they would be present in everybody. If they weren't, if we didn't all have a little bit of it, we wouldn't be able to get on with the things that we do. We wouldn't be able to, get things done. The drive of pitta is the thing that will kind of get us up, get us going in the morning. The vata is like your creative self. When you have a sudden moment of kind of inspiration or creativity, that would be your vata energy or your vata dosha expressing itself. And kapha, the earth sign, very much present in like something like parenting, for example, where you actually have to kind of ground and hold and nurture. Certainly gardening, anything to do with working outside as well, is a very kind of kapha orientated career move. And it's fascinating to kind of see where you might express the different characteristics of each dosha. So in our modern world, we're always on the go, cell phones, laptops, all that sort of thing. It's very easy to get imbalanced from all these different effects on our environment and on ourselves. So, for example, the cell phones, we've talked about the kind of the radio waves and that sort of thing. So it's affecting the air around us and therefore affects the air within us as well. It's the same thing when you think about like a humidity, for example. If you go into a humid place, that is the heat from the environment would be very much pitta. But the water, that water, that dampness, again, is kind of quite capillary, quite heavy on your breathing, heavy around you. That humidity is kind of almost a weight on you. And when it gets out of balance, for example, you might recognize humidity as being a place where, being a state, for example, where you feel like, God, I've got no energy. It's so humid. I can barely breathe, all this sort of stuff. I certainly recognize that from Thailand, when it was rainy season and it was a really hot day, the humidity would wear you out because it weighs on you. You don't feel light don't feel light of body or light of soul. You feel like it's heavy around me. I'm not taking in as much oxygen because there's more water in the air, so that it weighs you down, it slows you down. And so it's important, I think, to recognize all these environmental changes that we go through and how they affect us and the elements within us as well. Again, back to that kind of idea of oneness, and that we've all come from the elements that have created every part of our world. So recognizing those elements within us as well is really, really important, so that we can identify in with, okay, it's a rainy day, for example, or it's cold. So when it's cold, it's going to be kind of more vata, because cold is actually quite kind of drying. And so, you begin to sort of produce there's more air in the body. You might notice things like cracks in the body, when you kind of like get up in the morning and you feel your back crack and you feel your knee crack and your ankle might crack or something like that. And you're like, oh, okay. So that would be like an imbalance of vata, the air in the system, because if it's gotten cold outside. And if you think about, what you can see and what you can feel, dries everything up, the cold. If you watch the plants just in winter, like, I'm looking at winter as I look outside my window now, and there's no leaves on the tree. Everything's very dry. There's not that moisture. There's not that, even if it's been raining, there's not the humidity. There's not that moisture. There's not that warmth. Everything's kind of more dry and battery. So these are one of the things that, when you're looking at your doshas, you begin to consider as well how the environment plays on your doshas and what might bring you in and out of a primary or a secondary dosha. And the important thing to think about with your doshas is really how balanced you are within them. So, for example, I know that I have an imbalance of vata. I'm usually predominantly kapha vata, but I have an imbalance of vata at certain times of the year and at certain times of the month because of my monthly menstrual cycle. And I noticed that, and I noticed it primarily through my yoga asana, because some mornings I will get up and I get on the mat and everything is just crack, 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 crack for about the first 5 minutes. I'm cracking every little bone in my body. There's air in my system. And it's because even though I've slept well and I've been kind of tucked up under my duvet, the environment that I'm sleeping in has gotten colder, has gotten drier. And I'm breathing that in. I'm bringing that environment in with every breath in. It's affecting my system because of my dosha, because of the way my body works. And the subsequent consequence of that is that I have kind of more dry air around my bones, which is why you get the cracking. And you might find other ways of expressing like a vata imbalance. For example, if you suffer with a lot of wind or flatulence, something like that, again, you would notice that you're going to be expressing that more, shall we say, when there's an imbalance of vata. So if you find out that, or if you realize that actually, I've kind of got these imbalances and I'm expressing them at the moment, then you can begin to adjust your dosha using different things. So for example, with me, with vata, when I get out of balance with vata, I know that I should be using kind of heavier things, more earthly based things, to be able to calm the vata, to be able to introduce a weight that counterbalances the air, if you like, which makes sense, right? Kind of just begin to layer stuff on top and the light stuff begins to come back down and back down into balance. And so, for example, I would, after I've done my practice, I'd go upstairs. I would have just an aromatic dressing, which is basically applying oils onto my body. And I would use heavy oils, kind of more greasy oils. If you like, I might use something like a nut oil or a sesame. What I like is actually sesame seed oil. I think it's a nice, rich aroma, for one thing. Smells are very important in Ayurveda, as well as being a thick, heavy oil that will coat my skin, that will permeate into my body and take those beautiful properties, that kind of beautiful, heavy, and kind of almost greasy nature of the oil, and take that into my system. And I'll find, even if you just rub that around your knees, for example, sometimes when I've got particularly cracky knees, if I just rub the sesame seed oil around my knees, I'll find that actually, they work a little bit more easily. They feel more lubricated. And it's interesting to see the changes that happen when you begin to adopt these sort of diet changes and environmental changes around you as well. So there's lots of sort of things that you can do like that. And once you've found out your dosha and you've read a little bit about which each of them is, which I'm going to go through now, you can begin to put some of the practices in place. So quickly, vata, the vata element is air. People born with vata as their primary dosha are energetic, creative, and natural risk takers who often initiate projects. However, when vata is out of balance, they experience nervousness, anxiety, fear, fatigue, and depression. Other physical signs of vata imbalance include constipation, dryness, flatulence, weight fluctuations, poor circulation, decreased sweating, and feeling easily exhausted. And a lot of those things you might resonate with being quite dry within your system. Constipation, for example, again, if you eat something that has a lot of fluid and has a lot of moisture in it, it will actually help you to digest things more easily. This is why they sort of say as well, keep your water intake up, because it helps keep the balance within the system and aid the digestive system. If the digestive system is dry, then there's not as much moisture to be able to push the foods and everything else in and through and around from the upper intestine into the lower intestine. So it just makes sense that would mean that your digestive system is more sluggish because it has to work harder to get to start moving the foods around, and that your alimentary system as well is more sluggish because you're not able to kind of allow things to pass down as quickly. They're not as well lubricated, for example. So that's one of the things with the vata elements, the vata dosha. Those with excess vata or who have vata as their primary dosha should concentrate on calming their anxiety and turning their fear into joy and fatigue into energy by following the Ayurvedic principles for reducing vata. So I'm going to go over some of that sort of stuff with diet, and with also, again, like as I said before, with aromatic dressing, how you can bring certain things into your life that will help with being able to rebalance your vata. Then the pitta element, which is fire. And again, we all have a little bit of this in us. So it's just really working out what your predominant dosha is so that you can work on keeping mainly that one balanced as well, making sure that one comes back into balance so that you can bring the other two up. That we're bringing everything into balance, okay? People born with pitta as their primary dosha are natural leaders and administrators, capable of taking precise, decisive and focused action. However, when pitta is out of balance, they experience mood fluctuations, irritability, increased body temperature, restlessness and impatience. Other physical signs of pitta imbalance include broken capillaries, weight fluctuations, sweatiness, sleeplessness, and an overactive mind. So again, when we think about pitta dosha, we're really thinking about the element of fire. And if you think about body temperature, increase in body temperature, you're talking about the heat in the body going up. You're talking about excess fire, too much fire. Now, when we're looking at the way the body works, within yoga and Ayurveda, we'll often talk about the Agni, which is the fire within, specifically more around the digestive system. You know, like if you think about really the functions of the digestive system and the parts that we know about scientifically, you'd be relating a lot towards like the acid, if you like. You know, the acid would be the burning force within your stomach. And so the Agni is that same sort of thing, but it's also the ability to be able to absorb, the ability to be able to process. That's a lot of to do with the fire, the Agni, the pitta dosha within you as well. So people born with pitta who have imbalances like broken capillaries, that's that force. It's that it's gone too far, it's too much, it's too high, it's burning too high. If you think about increasing the heat, what happens? The flame goes up, the gases will explode. You know, it turns everything up, it increases the pressure. And if you're thinking about increasing pressure on capillaries, which are obviously one of the finest of the veins, you know, that's why you'll get the bust, the combustion, because they can't handle the too much pressure. It's too much. And again, if you're thinking about it being too much and bringing everything up, you are talking about restlessness and impatientness. You know, because if you're turning it up, if you're putting the pressure on, if you're in like heightening the fire, if you like, then you're going to get greater heat, you're going to get greater impatience, you're going to get greater restlessness, increase in body temperature, mood fluctuations, because you become out of balance and you become more volatile as the fire, if you like. You think about how fire dances around. When you turn it up, it can get out of control. So it can be real mood fluctuations, you know, going straight into anger, irritability, you know, again, quick to anger. Also, the other physical signs of pitta imbalance include weight fluctuation. So it's that inflammation as well. Weight fluctuation, bloatiness, sleepiness, sweatiness, all of that is to do with not being able to be calm in the digestive area as well. You know, sleepless nights are often related to gut health and what's going on in your gut at the time that you're trying to sleep. This is why people, you know, suggest that you don't eat too late to close to bed, because it can really affect the digestive fire and your metabolism and what you're absorbing and not absorbing during the night, how you're able to heal and rejuvenate overnight, all these sorts of things. So science is really, you know, proving what Ayurvedic science has been saying for thousands of years now. And it becomes more credible almost, even though people were living like that thousands of years ago. Now we're beginning to draw the parallels and it's become more credible. And so, you know, you may have heard of Ayurveda, and certainly it's a lifestyle that, you know, it's not the hardest one to keep. I think the hardest thing that I've found trying to integrate Ayurveda into my family's lifestyle is the fact that we're all different. We're all different doshas and we're all different combinations of the dosha. And where some of us have similarities, ultimately speaking, we're all very different. We're all different culminations of the same, yes, but we're all exhibiting different primaries. You know, like I say, there's a couple of crossovers, but not enough that you could just cook kind of one meal every night that would feed each dosha. So that's one of the things that I found the hardest about integrating this into family life. But certainly, if you're on your own, then actually a few, and what you'll find is as well, that I've found anyway, is that actually I lean into naturally craving and wanting the foods that begin to calm and balance my dosha. Because I am Kapha and Vata, primary and secondary, I do tend to like spicy foods to be able to bring up the pitta, to be able to kind of burn off a bit of that air, if you like, to heat the air so that it kind of dispels a little bit, so I'm not quite so airy, but also to be able to ignite a little bit of fire under the kapha. The downside of kapha, which I'll come to in a minute, but it can be quite kind of lethargic. And so if I need to crack on or do something, I need something that's going to put a fire in me, get me going, really bring a little bit of, a bit of heat into my day, into my life, and into my synergy of myself. So those with excess pitta, or who have pitta as their primary dosha, should focus on turning irritability into directed positive action. So basically harnessing that energy and channeling it into something that's going to be beneficial for the other two. Balancing body temperature, doing something that calm the body, calming acne in the body, calming acne in the mind. Meditation is fantastic for pittas to be calming. When you calm the mind, you calm the body anyway. And in all honesty, meditation for any of the doshas is a great way of being able to bring home, to rebalance. But certainly for pitta, where you can get very mind orientated, that fire can go straight up into the mind and almost make it a little bit crazy. That really can help with calming the mood swings, calming the irritability, anger, all those sorts of things, and being able to really kind of bring pitta back into balance so that it is focused and achieving. That's the amazing thing about pitta. It's really, really driven, very much an achievement dosha. And so get that harnessed in each one of us, and you can really see yourself progressing and moving forward and having the gumption, the energy, and of course the insight to be able to do that as well. So again, there are certain foods, there are certain principles around pitta that you can harness to be able to bring that back into balance. Then kapha, elephant, which is the earth again. People born with kapha, their primary dosha, are the pillars of their communities. They have the ability to follow through, seeing projects to completion, and are affectionate and good-natured, experiencing the least mood fluctuations of the three doshas. However, when kapha is out of balance, they experience sluggishness, feelings of being stuck in a rut, strong attachments, addictions, possessiveness, oversensitivity, and laziness. Other physical signs of kapha imbalance include excess weight, cellulite, lack of motivation, and puffiness. So again, when you're thinking about kapha, it's the earth sign. It's the weight sign. It's the heavy sign. Typically, kapha personalities would be quite heavy in body. They might be, quite sort of childlike. Sometimes they refer to it as being where you perhaps carrying a little bit of weight, and it's a little bit chunky, a little bit big boned, that sort of thing. You're heavy. It's kind of you're a heavier build perhaps than Vata, for example, who would tend to be quite slight of frame, like air, quite slight. And the pitta frame tends to be almost like, I imagine a flame like a candle, kind of straight up, straight down, tends to be quite tall, slim, burning like that heat, like that flame coming upwards. Excuse me. So physical symptoms of kapha being out of balance, you're looking at excess weight, again, adding to the heavy. Right, the cellulite, where the toxins aren't getting burnt off, they're not being released right via the vata, via the air. So they're remaining stagnant, they're remaining heavy within the body. And again, that can be linked to this sort of puffiness, this idea of water retention, this idea of not being able to really burn stuff off and process it, so therefore the body holds on to it. And that's really the element of kapha in there. That's really the imbalance of the kapha sign. And again, lack of motivation. Think about you're heavy, thinking about for example, if you've put on a little bit of weight and you've just how that makes you feel, just how that makes you feel. It makes you feel like you don't want to go out, you're hiding away from things, you're resisting things, you shrink into yourself, that sort of thing. And it's the same with being out of balance in Kappa as well. You don't want to get things done. You would rather procrastinate. You would rather sit back and ignore things that you need to do. So in that respect, if you feel yourself doing that, then look at the questionnaire that I've put below the post to this video, and see whether or not the kappa is coming up for you. Again, one of them may come through as being like, wow, I am definitely this or that, or and it may be very strong. But even if not, just see what your answers were in terms of what might be out of balance. For each one, see what your answers were, and resolve them towards some level of being able to kind of bring that dosha particularly into balance for that specific thing. So, for example, like me physically, if you find that you've got a lot of vata imbalance at certain times of the year or the month, then in those certain times of the year or the month, bring practices in that support vata to be able to rebalance vata. And after a couple of days of bringing these practices in, you notice that you've already aligned, you've already rebalanced yourself, and actually you're not experiencing the same things as you were before. And I think that's true with all of the doshas. I found myself at certain times to be pitta out of balance as well. When we were coming back from Thailand to England, I found that I was getting very kind of anxious, and a lot of the ways I was expressing myself were very pitta related. Well, pitta's not massive in my dosha, in my taste test, if you like, in my dosha test. But because of the anxiety, because of the, I suppose I increased the agony, I increased the fire in my body from being anxious about the move, from constantly being on the go, from moving more, from driving myself more. You can increase it like that. And so I needed to kind of bring that back into balance and slow it all down and calm it all down. And because I started to notice different things manifesting in my body as well. I was having pain in the backs of my legs. My skin started breaking out. I lost a lot of weight. All these sorts of things that you see when you see a change in your body. There's a change in what's going on with you as well, whether it be emotionally, mentally, physically, whether it be in terms of your environment, whether you started a new job, a new exercise regime. There's always a catalyst to that change. It's just really beginning to look into it and find out what that catalyst is, and then being able to kind of put in the counterbalance to that so that you can bring it back into an alignment. So recognizing your dosha can be really, really helpful in that. And so you do the test, and then you click into the doshas explained PDF that I've added as well below. Then you'll have this, what I've just read out from the sheet, all down there, and you can begin to look into it for yourself and recognize a little bit more about your own dosha. So one of the things that I wanted to kind of, I suppose, really talk about today as well is the elements of how important it is once you recognize your Ayurvedic body type and you become familiar with how you present your body type. We can use this knowledge to understand the personalities around us as well, which has been really fascinating within my family dynamic, which is where I tend to go. But I do it with my clients and stuff as well. If I'll meet a client and I'll just kind of think about their dosha and what characteristics they might be exhibiting, and where those characteristics are out of balance, and then perhaps suggest certain things that they can do at certain times of the day as well. Like, for example, pitta is high in all of us midday, primarily because the energy on earth is the highest point. Midday is the highest point of the sun. It's the hottest point of the day, whether it's whether you're in the North Pole or in the tropics. It's still the hottest point of the day. It's still the point where the sun is highest, wherever you are in the world, and that affects our constitution. We were looking back last week at fasting, and we were talking about our circadian rhythms. It's also it's all related to that as well. So around midday is your fieriest part. If you're going to be doing exercise around the midday part, remember that you're going to be really pushing your body, because not only is your natural level of pitta higher at that time of the day, you're also driving your pitta by exercising. You're driving your pitta force. You're igniting the fire within you to really, so you're really going to kick that off. So it can be a great time to be doing like losing weight and doing some sort of dynamic stuff as well. Or it's the best time to be eating, really, because then you've got the most amount of digestive fire. So to be able to skip lunch is perhaps not a good idea, whereas perhaps a lighter breakfast, a lighter dinner around the close of the circadian rhythm and the opening of the circadian rhythm with dawn and dusk, again, that feeds into the principles of Ayurveda as well. So people's strengths and weaknesses when their doshas are in or out of balance can become very, very obvious. Like I said, this is something that I can see within my children and my husband and also my clients. And you can also begin to kind of almost predict behaviors around sort of things. And if someone, for example, like my son is very pitta based, as well as my, his primary dosha is pitta, followed up by kapha and vata, which kapha and vata seem to be quite equal with him, but the pitta is very strong. He's got a very high metabolism. He's one of these people that, can eat sort of candy bars coming out of their ears if they wanted to, and he wouldn't put on weight. And he's constantly eating. His agni, his digestive fire is constantly burning. He's very slender build, again, sort of like slim build, lean, and very driven. But out of balance when he hasn't eaten, for example. This is something with pitta, is that they do need to eat regularly because you're constantly burning it off, so you do get hungry. Well, when he gets out of balance with his pitta, maybe he hasn't eaten, and he needs to, maybe he's an hour or something after his usual lunchtime, you really begin to notice the imbalance comes through in the fact that he kind of gets hangry. His patience levels go down, his irritability goes up, he gets jittery, he gets, you can see him physically being manifesting these things as well. And so, and as soon as he begins to eat, he begins to calm. And foods, again, like heavier foods will begin to kind of calm that straight down. Quite sort of thicker meats and stuff like that. When he eats red meat, it will calm the pitta down really quick because it's almost like, a meaty cover over that fire. It takes a while to burn it through. So it gives that pitta something to do, and something to really kind of get its teeth into, if you excuse the pun, we're talking about a steak. But so in that sense, it's fascinating to watch as well. And I know with my son that he can't go too long without having regular meals. Otherwise, these are the imbalances that we're going to be facing. And I also know that actually within himself, if he's not eating regularly, then that fire, that agni, that element is going to start, producing things like excess bile. You're looking at kind of heartburn and irritability, and sort of like turning into drugs and omeprazole, for example, one of these kind of pharmaceutical drugs that helps to calm the acid in your stomach. That can be because of an imbalance of pitta. If you bring the pitta back into balance, you won't need the omeprazole. So there's lots of things that aggravate pitta as well, things like smoking, toxins. Really, it's like fuel to the fire. Imagine you throw alcohol onto a fire, what does it do? Shoom. Same thing if you threw a big bunch of tobacco onto the fire, same thing. Shoo. It's got something to burn, and toxins are one of these things that really give it a lot to do. So whereas kapha, for example, would hold on to that toxin and would kind of, it'd be like a toxin moving through treacle. It would really hold on to it, and it becomes present. If we talk about cellulite, you'd be able to see that in the fatty tissues of the body. You'd also be able to see it, kind of coming through in sebaceous glands, those sorts of things as well. The toxins being held in the skin. If you have a kapha imbalance, then those would be, and kapha and pitta imbalance, those would begin to kind of really erupt. Pitta is something like acne would be something that you'd seen expressed through pitta, especially in like the younger years of life when kapha is very present. So it becomes very skin based because of course the skin is holding on, and then the fire from the pitta dosha is really forcing it out. It's like erupting it like a volcano, and that's why you get that that painful, sore, aggravated skin conditions. And while we're talking about skin conditions, another one that you might see present would be through a pitta and vata imbalance would be something like dermatitis. So dermatitis is like the really dry skin. So initially you'd be thinking as well, absolutely, that was got to be a Vata imbalance. There's got to be that air imbalance because it's so dry, and again, if you're thinking about it, but it's also what has heated that up, what has heated the air in the body up enough, and it will be the Pitta dosha. The Pitta dosha working with the element of fire working with the element of air, the Pitta dosha working with the Vata dosha, and both of them being out of balance, both of them being out of whack. When they come together, that's what's producing the affliction of dermatitis, that dry, itchy skin. The itch, the heat, that comes in through the skin is the Pitta. And then the dryness and that scaly crustiness that's coming off your skin will be the imbalance of the Vata. So it's fascinating when you begin to look into some of the things that you are expressing. And, it might not be every day, but again, like I find certain periods of the year, certain times of the month, that's when I'll express my imbalances the most. And that's when I'll lean into some of the remedies that Ayurveda gives us into, how to bring yourself back into balance. So one of the things that I wanted to read out to you guys as well that I found in some of my research novels was about how the combination of the three doshas can work simultaneously to enable you to really get stuff done in an inspired way, I suppose, because again, when you look at the Vata, you're looking at creative thought. You're looking at that kind of airy, creative, out there thought. When you're looking at Pitta in its best, in its harmony, you're looking at drive, you're looking at ambition, you're looking at focus, really getting somewhere. And of course, with the Kapha, with that earth element, it's also very much grounded in reality. When Kapha is in balance, it's very grounded. It's strong. It will take you there. It will get you there. It will get everything done. It will see things through. It's a constant, and it's a deep and heavy force that will root into that idea that you've created with your Vata, your Vata dosha, and it will support and hold Pitta as it drives forward, making the idea, bringing the idea into manifest, really making the decisions that need to be made as to what should be done next, how we should go forward with this creative idea, and then Kapha will take it forward. Kapha will do that work. So if you think about like just that, manifesting an idea, that's how you would lean into each of your doshas in harmony. So, it's fascinating. We all do this. So learning about what dosha you are and learning about perhaps where you might be out of balance can be very telling. One of the things that Ayurveda looks at, along with the kind of the ideas of lifestyle, which is obviously something that we've touched on because we're looking at stress. Obviously, stress would be increasing Pitta. We've looked at lethargy, that laziness, sitting on your bum watching television all day. That would be increasing Kapha. But anxiousness, stress, again, nervousness, sleeplessness, all that sort of thing, that's all Vata imbalance. And unfortunately, in the lifestyle that the majority of Westerners anyway seem to be living, is really imbalancing all three doshas altogether. And so it's no wonder that we're seeing so much disease, seeing so much unrest, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally as well in the world at the moment. Because if we're all subject to these three doshas, and the majority of the lifestyle that we're living in the West is contributing to all these doshas being out of whack, then we're really in a pretty bad place, because we want to be looking at bringing everything back into alignment, back into balance, so that we can channel these three doshas to really help ourselves getting forward, not just as individuals, but essentially as a human race as well, right? Being able to kind of get to a more conscious level of development, and really thinking again holistically about our health and about everything that we want to achieve in our lives, and recognizing all the different elements that can come in to help us. So in Ayurveda, they really talk a lot about herbs. There's a lot of herb lore in Ayurveda. I have this amazing book that I bought when I was in India called the Ayurveda Encyclopedia. You can see that there. And it is massive. And it goes into, every part of it. It says natural secrets to healing, prevention and longevity. And it deals with herbology, nutrition, exercise, panchakarma, which is cleansing, like gut cleanses, and all sorts of cleanses, cleaning up through the nose and through the breathing ways and all sorts of things. Aromatherapy, which we've touched on before with essential oils in this series specifically. Pranayama, which, if you don't know, is the study of breath as a form of energy, the prana being energy, yama being control. So being able to control the breath, to be able to regulate the energy levels within you. It's a practice that has been passed down through the 8 yoga sutras of Patanjali, the 8 limb sutras, sorry. So you can use breath itself to calm you down as well, to be able to rebalance pitta, kapha and vata. So hatha yoga, which is a type of yoga which is kind of a lot more slow, a lot more about balancing and bringing things into balance in terms of where you present on the mat that day, alongside other things. A full hatha practice would include pranayama and meditation and mantra and asana practice. So that it's kind of like the traditional stance of yoga, asana, if you like. So if you go to a hatha class, you get all these different elements present in that class. Meditation, gem therapy. So when they say gem therapy, they say using back crystals. So crystals, as we know, we use quartz crystal within any technological device that you can see in front of you now. There is a quartz crystal. It's used for memory retention, information retention. That to me is fantastic anyway. When you think what computers can do these days, it blows my mind that the crux of a computer is a crystal, is a quartz crystal that can hold on. If you've ever read anything about crystal skulls, you know that the information that held in skulls hasn't even been deciphered yet, and yet we know it's in there. The way they've been cut, the crystal skulls that have been found in the world over the last sort of 150, 200 years, I think, they all bring something different to the table in terms of when lights shone through them, when they're put through various kind of radiography machines and energy reading machines and all this sort of stuff, the way different lasers and stuff are put through them, and it's fascinating. It's fascinating, the information that we've been able to draw out of it, and yet we haven't even touched the sides. So crystals are fantastic for being able to rebalance energies and being able to work with them within your holistic health. I would very much recommend as well. Sound therapy. So again, recognizing that vibration heals and rebalances and resets, as well as unbalances and throws you out of balance. Different sounds that we are subjected to this day and age, for example, the low rumble of a plane, of a car engine, sirens, those sorts of things. They're all sort of fake sounds as well, but they're all sounds that hit into a lower vibration point and instigate different feelings because of those vibrations. We went through a few weeks ago about vibrations, and I was talking specifically about electromagnetic fields, EMFs, and how they can affect your own vibration as an energy being. And believe me, you're resonating at a certain vibration, and it will be dependent on your thoughts and how you look after yourself, your lifestyle, the amount of stress you've got in your body, your composition, the way you're made up. All those sorts of things will affect your vibration. So it's interesting to see that sort of 8,000 years ago, they're still looking at something like sound therapy, because they recognized then the ability that it has to heal. And now, all over the place, you can get gong baths and sound baths and that sort of thing, where you come together and you will be played high vibration sounds, played by all different kinds of instruments, but gongs and singing bowls, crystal bowls, all sorts of instruments, to be able to help rebalance your energy points in your body, your chakras, but also to be able to heal through on a cellular level with this kind of vibrational therapy that comes from sound. Color therapy, the difference in having certain colors around you and what that means. Now, Feng Shui has really sucked itself onto this one, because Feng Shui deals a lot as well with different colors that come in for different people, and Chinese have their own little way of looking at it. It seems to be aligned in with dates that you were born within in terms of the Chinese calendar, the lunar calendar, which again is fascinating because it parallels a lot with Ayurveda. But essentially, when you're thinking about color therapies, they have different colors that are good for different things. So, for example, good colors, I was told anyway, the good colors for me would be kind of, because I need to bring my pitta up, things like reds and oranges, yellows and pinks as well, just to kind of bring that up. And then stabilizing me in my kapha would be green. That earth color, the color of the heart, something that sort of stabilizes, brings me in, really grounds me. So when I went for my Ayurvedic consultation, those were things that were said to me, that actually if you surround yourself with these colors, they help to stimulate the pitta inside you, and then help to calm down the vata and the kapha inside you as well. You bring that grounding force in, and that's going to be very beneficial for your constitution. Lifestyle counseling. So this is something that I do a lot with my clients, looking at the whole way that you live, not just how you live in terms of whether or not you live, that you're stressed in your environment, whether you have long hours at work, all that sort of thing, but also how you live, particularly in your bedroom, in your living room. Is there clutter around you? Does that affect your mind? What sort of colors have you used around you? Are they perhaps too cold or too warm for your constitution? Those sorts of things. So that lifestyle counseling is really about looking again at the picture of what influences you during the day, and how you would respond to that, and whether that might instigate an imbalance in your dosha, your primary doshas, secondary doshas, whatever. Your spiritual self, and counseling in general. So spiritual self, like I said before, one of the things that one of the first scribes of the Ayurvedic system said was that the idea of separateness from the divine is the initial cause of illness, the initial thing that you kind of almost need to fight for your right to longevity. And again, I think it's kind of because of this low vibration, almost anxiety, separation anxiety that we begin to experience, and how we build from that, whether we build into a positive, I'm not accepting this separation, I'm not accepting this anxiety, or whether or not we accept outright that we are not connected to a God, we don't have any faith, we respond, we react rather than respond to everything that's given to us. And that to me is interesting as well, because again, people find a lot of calm, a lot of space in faith, and a lot of peace. And it's interesting to me that spirituality was such a big thing to look at within the Ayurvedic system, because you wouldn't necessarily feel, when it says that it's the science of longevity and health, you wouldn't necessarily think that your spiritual self would have such an impact on that. But as always, what goes on up here and in here really affects everything else. So it's interesting to note that actually one of the things that can really affect your health is your level of spirituality and your level of belief and your level of faith. And so that's interesting as well. And it delves into all the systems. It has therapies and answers for all of them, for the circulatory system, the digestive system, respiratory system, urinary system, nervous system, reproductive system, immune system, metabolic system, things like your infections, wounds, issues of the skin, as well as even pet care. Looking as to how the vibration of the animals around you can really help you, and keeping them well as well. So there's, it's a lot of information that's been passed down under the umbrella of Ayurveda. And so I think it's fascinating, and certainly there is a lot of information out there. So really one of the things that I kind of wanted to go in with really was one of the things that I found easiest to integrate into my life, which has been the diets. Being able to ascertain that I am mostly sort of kapha vata, means that I need to kind of bring up my pitta a little bit to be able to keep those in balance. But also there are certain foods that kapha and vata will really benefit from, which will balance them out anyway. And so I invested myself in a Ayurvedic cookbook. And going through there, you learn a lot about what spices you should use, and whether or not, for cardamom, for example, is a great spice to use if you are out of balance with your pitta, because it calms anger, even though it's quite a kind of it's that fennelly tasting spice, if you're not aware of it, and it's actually quite a calming, cooling spice to use. So it's a great one for pitta. The worst thing to give pitta, for example, at the end of a night on, out in town, would be a curry, because you would just be adding, you've got the pitta inflammation from the alcohol. If you are a smoker, then, and you typically would be smoking with your drink, then that again is another toxin coming in, adding fire to the pitta dosha. And then to have like a curry, hot food in liquid form as well, that would, and the meat, because the meat, you require more fire to burn off meat in your system than you do vegetables. So all those sorts of things for pitta constitution are going to likely end up with either bloating, or you're going to end up with some kind of like inflammation in the stomach wall, maybe some dodgy guts, which I know we also say are curries, but other different doshas can handle it a little bit easier and wouldn't necessarily be affected like that. Whereas the pitta, it would be more likely to go kind of straight through, bloat you out to begin with as well, maybe cause you some heartburn, and a sleepless night. If if you're having curry too late in the day as a pitta, you're going to have a sleepless night, because it's just too much fire going on in your belly for your system to be able to properly calm and cool, ready for sleep. So one of the first things that you can begin to look through when you get yourself into Ayurveda is the foods that you can use to help calm things, calm your body down from the gut out. So there are lots of different tastes to Ayurveda. You've got bitter, you've got astringent, you've got sweet, you've got salty. There are lots of different, I'm just trying to find my little charts here that was talking about all the difference. Okay, here we go. So all the different qualities in sort of kapha foods, for example, would be sort of heavy foods like lentils, beans, something like that, cooked slowly, cooked into like almost a dal, like that kind of soup, that sort of thing would be like your heavy foods. Slow foods, again, that would move quite lightly through the system, but also, because of the fact that you've got to break down the beans still, it's in a protein, so it's quite a slow food. Meats and stuff would be slow as well. That takes a long while to get through. Cool foods for kapha would be very good. Cucumbers, celeries, those sorts of things, mint as well. Anything that cools down. Then oily foods, so foods that are cooked with a lot of oil. Obviously you've got to have the good food, the good oils. The heavy oils is what you want with for kapha, or that they would be your kapha balancing, would be the heavier oils, like I spoke about earlier, about like a sesame oil or something. It's a heavy oil. It's not like light like sunflower or rapeseed. It's not that light oil. It would be like a thick extra virgin olive oil. It would be a sesame seed oil. It would be an avocado oil, lovely thick kapha oil, and slimy in that sense as well. Oils are slimy. Dense foods, again, taking the time to kind of really move through the system. Soft and static. So pitta qualities. Pitta foods would be kind of quite light, and sort of hot, spicy foods as well, but also oily, anything that's kind of going to bring a bit of fire in as well. So you can have like a chili oil, for example, would be kind of like an instigation into the fire, but around an oily, it's almost throwing the fuel into the fire. If you think about oil, it would go straight up, right? So it's the same sort of thing with pitta. Liquids, quite easy to cut, easy to take in, easy to burn off. Again, that would fuel the fire of pitta. And spreading foods, so things like again, different types of wetter foods. It's those in a curry sauce, in a tomato sauce, something like that. They would tend to be more pitta based foods. And then the vata qualities would be light, cold, dry, rough, mobile, clear. So we might be looking at a clear soup would be like a vata soup, for example, because there's not the density in it. It's a water base with a little bit of vegetable, a little bit of separate meat, something like that in there. Cold foods like salads, they instigate a lot of vata. I didn't realize this until just recently, actually, when I was looking through this cookbook. And it was telling me that salads eaten in the winter for people with any kind of vata in their constitution is like, just filling the system with air, because they're quite cooling, so that it doesn't take a long time for them to kind of burn through, but there's a lot of air in all the vegetables that you're taking in, and because they're not being cooked, because they've not been like made dense or had the water brought out from them, the body takes and will absorb the water, but it's left with a lot of fibrous stuff, a lot of air, and so, that's what it means when it says kind of cold and dry. It's that same thing as once the air has then been dispelled out into the system, you're left really with a dry food because it hasn't had the oily, watery heaviness come in with it. Rough food as well, so roughage, like and things that are dry, like nuts, and even dried fruits to a certain extent. I mean, some dried fruits can be quite sugary and can be quite heavy, so they can be quite good for kapha, but a lot of dried fruits are still quite light and airy. Like, for example, apricots would be quite kapha-y, but raisins and pineapple, dried mango, those sort of things, they lose so much water that they just go up into the vata dosha area. So you can be using those sorts of things to be able to bring down pitta, for example, would be great to be able to cool that down with some nuts, because they've got that little bit of oil in there, but there's also the dry, and so you'd be able to kind of burn those off quite easily. So yeah, there's all different things that help to kind of determine your dosha, but one of the things that you might look at initially is the sort of foods that you eat, and those foods that are good for you. And hopefully, if you're thinking about your body in terms of Ayurveda and in terms of the doshas, in terms of being able to respond to it, you are thinking about yourself more holistically, and you're recognizing that there are some times when your body is really craving certain things, and there's a reason for that craving. So one of the things that can help you in terms of characteristics and how you might relate, but also might be within your relationships. A vata person, like a light and airy based person, would be quite the loner. They might be quite non-committal, more short-term relationships, not wanting to get into longer-term relationships, not really seeing the benefit of those sorts of things. And, again, that commitment shy, doesn't want to really stick with something too airy, too floaty. It likes the idea of really being free as well, which I don't mean that in like a derogatory sense, but some people really do feel like, actually, I might be better off if I was on my own. I don't want to be tied down. It's that idea of I don't want to be tied down. That's very much a vata perspective. Don't want to be tied down. Don't want to be subject to something weighing me down. And so that might express in relationships as well. Whereas for pitta, pittas want to be very highly regarded and in prestigious circles. Reputation is very important to them. Who they associate themselves with is very important to them. They like relationships that bring prestige and status. So they're going to be, again, it's that kind of high power, that if you think about high power positions, that's where pitta is going to feel it's most comfortable, because it's burning bright, it's shining, it's almost consuming as well. It may abruptly terminate a relationship that is ill-serving. So when the light comes on, that's it, it's gone. When the fire burns it out, it's gone. There's no going back. That's the way they feel. That's the way it is. And that's the way they are in a relationship. When it's not serving them, they're gone. There's no kind of dilly-dallying around like you might find with with a vata or a kapha, just not indecision, if you like. With a pitta, they very much know where they're going and what they want out of life. So yeah, if it's not serving them, gone quite quickly. So you might know people like that in your life, or you might be somebody like that in your life, and you think to yourself, well, actually, okay, as much as that's great, I need to bring that back into balance. I don't want to be somebody who doesn't give other people the benefit of the doubt or another chance. I don't want to be quite so quick in my judgment, for example. Or you might be thinking, if you're out of vata balance, that actually this idea of non-committal, yes, I've got the freedom, but I haven't got the stamina in a relationship. I haven't really got that intimacy. When it's out of balance, that's what you might be feeling, and you might be able to recognize about yourself. So Kapha is really all about, I mean, Kapha really is like, I always think of like children with Kapha, it's kind of a bit doughy, they're carrying a little bit of squidgy excess weight, a little bit chunky around the cheeks, or, around the waist, that sort of thing. Very childlike, fun, but also, desire to be liked by everybody, that want to be liked, that want not to be rejected, that willingness to kind of be a little bit almost subservient in that, to give up to your own uniqueness and your own ideas through serving via Kapha. Keeps friends for a long time, though, somebody who would be very well thought of and is very loyal, and will make the effort with people too. Prefers doing things like travel, exercise, all that sort of thing with somebody, not somebody who would naturally, like Vata or Pitta would be independent people, not Kapha. Kapha very much is a community person, has difficult terminating relationships, even if they're all serving. As far as they're concerned, their loyalty shines through. They're really in this relationship, and they don't want to give it up, not just for themselves, through like almost that insecurity, but also because they think that they can keep it. They're comfortable with almost being a weight around their neck. They're comfortable with that heaviness. So you might know somebody who's expressing those sort of things in the relationships, whether it be with you as a parent, or as a friend, or as within an intimate relationship. And you might be able to notice the sort of things. Well, actually, maybe if we brought their Pitta back into balance, for example, they might not be so concerned about who they are, what they're bringing to the table, all that sort of stuff. Bring that a little bit more back into balance if need be. And with Vata, beginning to bring them into a more sense of a community, which, obviously helps serve the majority of people, having support around them, and people to lift them up and change their day, and all that sort of stuff as well. We are community beings. Energy levels is another thing that I wanted to sort of share with you. Energy level for Vata, if you think about that, this is where I love this, because you can really begin to build to this be like a breath. It's like you can take a big breath in, but after a certain amount of time, it's gone, and then it's gone. So they tire easily. It's there, and then it's gone. It's puffed out, basically. And they tend to be suited for artistic and creative jobs. Vata people, there's a lot of imagination. There's a lot of energy coming into that creative space, and Vata tend to be very, very good at creative jobs, as long as they can keep it a bit more balanced, and they can keep the fire of the Pitta going, so that they're a bit more driven. They will achieve in highly creative roles. Pitta tends to work beyond physical capacity, so very big, high tendency for stress. Again, if you think about stress and how it manifests in the body, if you are stressed, you're going to be very likely to suffer from something like heartburn, from migraines, from anxiety, from irritable bowel syndrome, from, again, those sorts of things are all linked to Pitta and all linked to fire in the body, excess bile, excess acid in the stomach, all those sorts of things. It's all linked to that Pitta elements, that fire element. So they tend to work beyond physical capacity because they've got that tendency for stress. They can take it over the edge very, very easily. And they tend to be suited for quite intellectually minded jobs. So they're using their minds a lot, whether it be like negotiating, business, those sorts of things. That's going to be very good for a Pitta dosha, to be able to kind of get their mind in and focused, logical pathways, again, kind of getting from A to B quite quickly. And Kapha, again, kind of that physical, that strong build means that they're very well prepared to do strong physical jobs, whether it's around the home or out in the fields. It doesn't matter. They're very much physically able people. They can get on with it. They're very capable physically, tend to be quite strong, would be a good labourer, very determined, stoic, will get the job done, will keep going and going and going. They have that kind of that grounding energy that just keeps moving forward. So Kapha, again, to be, if somebody is really kind of under it and just not able to see that actually they're worth more, that would perhaps be an imbalance of kapha as well, because they're just sort of stoically head down, ploughing on through, irrespective of the fact that they, actually they could perhaps sort of bring themselves up, engage a little bit of vata or pitta, and see that there are other ways around this and that they could grow from that. They don't have to be kind of just constantly moving forward on the same level. Actually, they can be moving up with a little bit of instigation from the other two doshas. Silly things like attire. This is actually one of the ways that I look, my work out what dosha I think. So attire, vata types tend to be called more eclectic, trendy, and fashion focused. Again, it's that quickness, it's that changing it up. That they are they're quick to change, they're quick to move, they're quick to take on a trend. But equally, they're quick to express. So if it's more of an eclectic trend that they're expressing, it's because of this self-expression thing that they're, really wanting to do that. So that's, if you see somebody dressed quite eclectically, especially if they're sort of slight of build, maybe like wispy of hair, then they'd definitely be like that, expressing the vata personality through them. Pitta tends to be polished designer fashion. So they're very much about the label. Again, it's that prestigious, wanting to be recognized, wanting to be well known, wanting to be seen, kind of that bright light burning type thing. It is very much pitta, pitta dress sense. And kapha, again, being that kind of childlike idea that, they are disregard fashion, they're not fussed about it, they'll wear what's comfortable, loose fitting clothing, nothing that really perhaps shows off their figure or anything like that, just not interested. It's more functional for them. So if you kind of are somebody who's a bit more like that, I know I definitely feel that in myself, that I'm really not fussed with labels and stuff. It's all really about comfort for me and, being able to do what I need to do in the clothes. I'm not, I'm a yoga teacher, I'm a life coach. I'd spend a lot of time kind of moving, sitting, working with people. I need clothes that move with me. It's no good me wearing stilettos to work or anything like that. For me, it's not about that powerhouse that you get from, kind of dressing in that way. I know for a lot of other people it is, and actually whenever I kind of feel like I need to go to do a big girl's job, like going to see a solicitor or something like that, I find myself dressing into that power stage and almost embracing my pitta and saying, no, actually I want to be taken seriously. I want to be, treated as an adult rather than a child. Whereas when I'm doing my yoga and it's much more creative, much more fun, I'm much more likely to be wearing kind of the looser fitting clothes and really not caring, where they've come from or anything like that. I'm not, that's, that for me, it's just not even a thought when I'm in that space. So I definitely teach from that very grounded, earthy kapha place. I definitely drop into that really, quite easily every day. And speech, which again is something that you can ascertain from somebody quite easily and might just, you might have already built, for example, as I'm talking, an idea of who your partner would be probably. But speech vatas would be high pitched, fast, clips, stuff. And it's being speak and it being quick, airy, flow, quick. But they can run off topic, they can run on sentences, and can often be very chatty to the point of, just going round and round in circles as well. So that can be an imbalance of vata there. I might express that as well. I was just suddenly thinking. Then with pitta, quick-witted, clear, precise, sarcastic. Again, it's that kind of one-upmanship a little bit is expressed with the pitta. Sometimes you might feel that, but people who can hold their own, people who would be very good at sales, for example, being able to manipulate and play the game and cleverly, not game playing, play the game. You're witty, they're on it, they're focused, they're driven, they know where they want to go, they know what they're going to say to get there. And quick-witted, is clever. It's quick intelligence, being able to work a situation, that sort of thing. But sarcastic is, I suppose, like the downside of that a little bit in the terms of, there's that hierarchy, and when you're playing into sarcasm, you're playing into a hierarchy. It's a power. It's a power manipulation from speech. So, that would again be kind of Pitta out of balance a little bit with the sarcasm. And Kapha tends to be a deep voice, perhaps slowly spoken, can sometimes be monosyllabic, a little bit dull, that sort of thing. Answers to questions might be quite laboured, not quick-witting, not quick thinking, quite slow to process. But tends to have a melodious singing voice. There's that grounding to the voice that tends to be connected in with the vibration of the earth, the vibration of nature. That's that part of us all that makes us want to sing, when we kind of have something amazing and or feel really grounded, really at one with life, and you feel that sense of joy, and it comes up through the vocal cords, and that again is really Kapha being in balance and beautifully present in you. So those are a few characteristics for the different doshas. I really recommend having a look into Ayurveda as a way of finiting and highlighting perhaps your holistic self. There are, like I said, loads of other different ways that they will go through. And it's such a big science. I mean, just showing you that one book today, that encyclopedia, it goes through all the different things that different elements would be affected by. I've stopped here. I'm looking at, what am I looking at? Let's look at, I want to look at the circulatory system. Okay, come on to this. And it goes through and it does different ways that, different afflictions of the system, for example, that different doshas would be feeling. So, for example, I'm going to go into sickle cell anemia. I don't know if let's do hypertension, high blood pressure, right? High blood pressure. This is very, very common. Very, very common. Okay. And what Ayurveda says is that additional causes and developments. This is from the start. First, excess mental stress. Worry, anxiety, tension can be caused by Vayu, which is the out of balance of Vata, right? Second, hormonal imbalances, adrenal, thyroid, and reproductive, which are caused by Pitta, which obstructs the blood or urinary channels, and the kidney problems, and can cause kidney problems, which we caused by Kapha. So it's that blockage is the Kapha stuff. Again, different elements being able to be shown through those different imbalances. But the symptoms for Vata would be kind of sudden changes in pressure, irregular or an erratic pulse, caused by worry, strain, overwork, nervousness, and insomnia. So if you're that Vata presenting person, you might look at those parts of your life that were, maybe you're not sleeping very well. Maybe you are, often worried, you often feel under strain or stress, you are overworked, you are quite a nervous person, and you may already be experiencing symptoms of high blood pressure or hypertension, maybe kind of feeling quite anxious, sort of panic attacks, that sort of thing. With Pitta, an out of balance Pitta, when it comes to hypertension or blood pressure, would be a flushed face, red eyes, strong headaches, maybe migraines, sensitivity to light, nosebleeds because of the pressure, right? The nosebleeds because of the burst capillaries and all that sort of thing. The pressure is just too much. It all bursts. Anger, irritability, coming into the emotional self, burning sensation, sometimes with liver complications. So again, the burning sensation would be that the excess bile that's produced through anxious, nervous stuff coming into the stomach. Again, pancreatitis can be the same sort of thing, anxiousness, nervousness, and burning and liver complications. Again, if you've got pancreatitis, that the pancreas is the thing that produces and makes the bile for the stomach, but excess bile will then go into the liver to be distributed through the eliminatory systems in your body, and too much of it is going to end up harming the liver. So start looking into calming that all down as well. And Kapha is constant high pressure, obesity, fatigue, edema, high cholesterol. All those things are putting pressure on your circulatory system. So the Kapha by nature, just by being out of balance in terms of if there's too much weight, if there's too much heaviness in the body, that's going to put pressure on your heart and therefore pressure on your blood system. So general therapies, is, okay, so brain tonics. They use a lot of weird, kind of herb. I've had to Google a lot of names that have come up in this encyclopedia. And the same thing, when you start looking through cookbooks and stuff like that, there can be a lot of names of herbs and of spices that seem a little bit unfamiliar. Everything I've found that I've needed, you can definitely find online. I would even find that when I've Googled like the common word for something, fenugreek, for example, some weird word in the Ayurvedic encyclopedia, but it turned out to be fenugreek seed, which I was like, oh, I've seen that down in Sainsbury's, so I can go and get that. That's fine. So, it's quite interesting, but do look it up. And some things are not found as easily, but the majority of stuff these days you can get online anyway. So being able to bring value, bring vata back into balance through a lifestyle, they encompass things like pouring oil onto the head to be able to calm. Again, vata can be very much, if you think hot air rises, it's kind of very much up here. So being able to bring a hot oil onto the head and calm and blanket basically the air that's coming into your system in the top of your head and around there will be able to calm the symptoms of vata. Pitta, anything cooling, things like aloe vera gel, and harmonizing herbs, rhubarb, anything that's bitter, anything that really calms down, peppermints, those sorts of things as well, are pitta reducing. Garlic, onions, other hot, salty, pungent items will aggravate the condition. So you're looking at anything that's not going to add fire, anything that's going to be able to cool down the pitta in the system. If you're noticing any of the pitta symptoms like the flushed face, the red eyes, the violent headache, sensitivity to light, cut out all those acid producing and those heat producing elements to your diet. To your food diet specifically, and you'll be able to reduce the pitta level in your body. And kapha suggests reducing, excuse me, reducing the excess in kapha with things like berries and diuretics and that sort of thing. Myrrh is a very good one as well for kapha, for being able to bring it back into balance specifically for high blood pressure. So there's a lot to find out. And if you've got presenting symptoms, that's a great place to start. Start thinking about perhaps what's caused these symptoms based on your dosha, the little printout that you can get that tells you exactly what each dosha will do and how it will manifest in your body. And then begin to do your own research. There is loads of information online. You can go out and you can buy the Ayurvedic encyclopedia, but in all honesty, there's a lot of information online, and there are a lot of cookbooks that you can get into. This one gives me, for example, it's given me examples for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, for snacks, for puddings, for juices, for hot drinks. There's all sorts out there. And what it will do, like scrambled egg whites, is a tridoshic recipe for breakfast eggs. So once you take out the protein, once you take out, the egg yolk, for example, you basically are left with a substance that the egg white is tridoshic. It's calming for all the doshas because it doesn't have any of the kind of the properties needed to kind of inflame or ignite one or the other. Egg yolks are warming. So again, if you're pitta, then too much egg is not going to be good for your system because you're again igniting the fire. Okay. But for kapha and vata, eating the egg yolk will ignite that fire. If you need to kind of rebalance, that will ignite the fire. So it's a good one to kind of get into. And you begin to learn through your cookbooks what foods will incite what reaction in your body. And that's really been sort of fascinating as well. And it makes it practical. It brings it into your life. Suddenly you're able to cook all these different things for you and for your family that are really feeling into the way you are at the moment. And again, it's being able to notice some of the characteristics and perhaps ascertain what you are for the majority of the time. But when you see some things presenting, maybe recognize as well that you are out of balance or for that particular dosha at this particular time. And work on from there. So I hope you've enjoyed hearing about Ayurveda, or something about Ayurveda, and I hope it's incited you a little bit more to go and find out more about the different doshas, and what you might be presenting and what your family might be presenting. Just a note on the questionnaire, it's a good idea to do the questionnaire a couple of times. They recommend that you do it for who you are now, for who you are at the moment, but also for who you were as a child. And I certainly know with a lot of the therapy work that I do, and the coaching work that I do a lot of work with taking people back to their childhood, and working on what they were born with, working on how they manifested initially into this world before all the conditioning came in. And often you can see changes in the person that you've become, and you might be able to recognize different imbalances than you perhaps might thought when you compared yourself to how you were as a child. So, for example, as a child, perhaps you were very very tall, thin, lean person. You had a very high metabolism, but as you've got older, you've really noticed that you're packing on the pounds and the bloat and all that sort of thing. So maybe as a child, you were presenting as a very imbalanced pitta. But as an adult, you're an out of balance pitta, so you've got too much acid going on in your body, and you might be able to find out about some of the diseases and the illnesses that are aligned with too much acid in the body. That the majority of disease is caused by stress in the body. So really watch your pitta. That's definitely, if you're a pitta body type anyway, watch the level of stress in your body, watch the amount of fuels to your fire that you're bringing into your life, because too much excess of acid in your stomach, and in your body, generally speaking, is not good. It's going to be burning at things, literally. So begin to kind of bring that into consideration too. And yeah, when you go through this is what they look like. Go through the questionnaires on each one of them. Go through, for first of all, perhaps in one pen, as how you are now, and secondly, then go through how you were as a child, and perhaps compare the two and see where you perhaps might want to bring more of one dosha back into balance, and begin to sort of ignite that youthful creativity that you had, for example, or that feeling of feeling very, very grounded and actually happy and content just with everything and anything wherever you were, which is very much like a kapha quality, actually, in its best, in its finest. Kapha is is very settled, is very grounded, is very happy where it is. Out of balance, it's lethargic, it's not getting stuff done, it's hiding away from things. So again, if you feel like that might be something that you have leaned into a little bit more, you used to be such a content child, and now you just don't feel like you're really getting anywhere, you're really doing anything with your life, that you're not really pushing yourself as much as you could, then that would certainly be something to be looking into, and compare the two. It's really interesting to do that sort of thing. And in Ayurveda, they do say that knowing the difference between your present self and your younger self can give you a real insight into how your body should be working. If you find that you're not actually sure, that comparison between the two can give you that, which again, fascinating, right? I mean, I love this sort of stuff. So I hope that that's been informative and brought a little bit more interest into the topic of Ayurveda for you. Do the questionnaire, just print it off or do it online. I'd love to hear how you get on. So if you find out something that's been really telling to you, then please comment below. And if you find out that you sort of feel to yourself, actually, I could definitely be using some food and nutrition and that sort of thing to be aligning myself, or if you prefer to lean more into some of the more what we kind of call alternative therapies now, but the sort of therapies that have been produced and used for the last 8,000 years in terms of sound therapy and crystals and yoga and meditation and all those sorts of things, those are the sorts of practices that you can bring in to help rebalance all. So, really look for a sound bath near you, especially if you're pitta and you're out of balance, or you are looking for a little bit more life in your kapha self. And yoga, again, can be very, very grounding for vata. Anything that is presenting yourself within your body, that can be very, very grounding for vata. which is very good. You know, it'll mean that you'll be able to bring that creativity home and really use it for your own benefit. So it's fascinating, and really this has just been like a little introduction into it. It's a massive subject, and one that's constantly fascinating me. So I hope I've managed to bring a little bit of interest in there for you as well. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I look forward to sharing some more ancient antidotes with you guys next week. Thanks so much for joining me. Love and light. Good night.
Humanity has been on an epic journey of discovery, learning the truth about the world we live in. New discoveries about the true origins of humanity, ancient history, free energy, as well as the systematic corruption of world governments are now on the forefront of our daily reality. Is the world headed towards destruction based on control and power? Or is an opportunity now being presented to shift and uplift into a higher consciousness? My name is Mel V, co-founder and creative director of Conscious Consumer Network, an independent broadcast network that was launched on the 1st of January 2015. Conscious Consumer Network provides full training and an interactive support network for all broadcasters, and we are always looking for inspiring and educational content.
Hi, this is Lainey Liberty.
And this is Mira Siegel.
Conscious Consumer Network has expanded to multiple broadcast locations, increasing our availability and reach across the world, remaining on the cutting edge of independent media. If we wish to create a better world, we must first create better media, geared towards real education instead of indoctrination.
You guys really are what changing the world is going to be about. It's educating kids at a grassroots level.
Dare to seek a better world. Support independent media.